do that.
All right, well, we're doing introductions for those who just came in. My name's Adam Fletcher. And if you don't know, Kath Nolan.
I'm Kath Nolan. And so actually I am the coordinator of this class, so I thought it was probably a good chance for me to come and actually have a visit with you. Things changed. Come in.
You're in the right place. We're teaching for down codes tonight.
So there were changes at the beginning of the semester. I came in a week late, and I am now looking after the OUA people, which is why I'm spending that little bit of extra time at the beginning, dicking around, getting the recording right. That is for you, those people at home in their pyjamas. And so you've seen me on the videos, so my involvement in this course has been pretty much since it was redesigned, and we are handballing it to Adam, who will take over properly next year. Summer. In summer, so which is exciting. So Adam started to tell you, before I sent him off on an errand, which is a little bit unfair, he started to tell you a little bit about himself. Can you
Probably
start him?
bears repeating since there's twice as many people and the recording's just started.
Here online.
All right. So my name's Adam Fletcher. I'm a new lecturer here at the Graduate School of Business and Law, just started, fresh. I previously worked for the Attorney General's Department in Canberra. I worked for an NGO in Switzerland for a couple of years called the Association for the Prevention of Torture. And then most recently I've been working for the Caston Centre for Human Rights Law as a research fellow before I started here. I just finished my PhD, which is why I'm now allowed to teach.
Me? I don't have a PhD, but they let me teach anyway, because they call me industry equivalent. So my background is completely different from Dan's. I've never done a good thing for a human being and suffering from torture ever. I have entirely spent my life as a commercial lawyer. In that regard, in fact, I have not even been a litigator. I have written contracts, I have documented deals being put together, and I've done that both in big and medium-sized firms. I've done it as a partner of a law firm, I've done it as general counsel, and these days, actually I spend way more time here than I should, I think. I do a little bit of consulting work, not as much as I probably should, and many of you will have come across me in my capacity an interest in contracts, because you can't avoid me there, or in technology law. And that's why Adam wanted to do this all by himself, and I muscled my way in because this is my favourite class in this process, and I wanted also for you guys at home to hear my voice and know that we are actually working on this stuff together. So got a bit of a plan for today. Well, I guess let me step back a minute. When I first was asked to redesign this course some years ago now, so we did it for 2015 redesign, I think. The thing that really interested me about the course is, and don't get me wrong, I think ethics is fundamental to everything we do, but what floats my boat was the practice management side, because I seriously am the daggiest person that you've ever met. I think it's really interesting, the business of law, and I'm particularly interested in the way the business of law is changing. And so my own nascent research interest is really around the question is, if the way that we practice law or conduct ourselves as professionals is changing, if we take that as a given, and I suspect by the end of tonight you will have a view on that one way or the other, but if you take that as a given, what does that mean for the way we teach people to become lawyers? And I don't have an answer to that. So any time that I get the opportunity to talk to other people about that, I'm really interested in what you think. So, and again, like I said, I've been a partner in a law firm. I have run my own business. The legal practice that I do now, I do as a sole practitioner. So I guess I've also worked in teeny-weeny little firms of one. And so I'm really interested in that. So when we were doing a redesign, I was really looking a large part, because the cases look after themselves. You know, ethics is ethics. the end of the day. Ethics is making choices between two wrongs. If ethics was about making an easy choice and picking good over bad, you'd be able to sort of sort it out pretty quickly. But usually ethics is having two bad choices and having to work out, I want to say what the lesser evil is, but that's not, that's too simple in itself. But I'm also interested in, you guys chose to do a law degree. And I get the great opportunity to work with students when they're right at the beginning too. So they can remember then why they've chosen to do it. At this stage, you think, what was I thinking? And it seems to be for a few different reasons that I hear. I'd be really interested if you've got different reasons again. Some of you work in the legal industry somewhere. We often have people who work in police or corrections, they work in the courts, or they work in the Justice Department somewhere. And those people tend to either think, I could go further in my job if I had this qualification. Or some of them have champions and mentors who say, what are you doing? You're too smart for this, do the next qualification. There is always, I think, a little slice who've either had a really bad divorce, a really hideous business bust up, or just don't get along with their next door neighbours and want to get that fence as high as they possibly can. Whatever, some version of that means that they want to be lawyers. There's usually a group who want to change the world, and in some way. Some of those people want to change the world by becoming as rich as they possibly can and think that being a lawyer is a good way to do that, so they just want to change their world. But there are a lot of people who come with really big plans around particular issues. I've had students who are particularly interested in, I'm just thinking what I was speaking to this week, who is works a lot with people with acquired brain injuries and is really concerned about how many people with acquired brain injuries end up in nursing homes. And is looking at, so her law degree is just part of a bigger strategy for a business plan that she has around making the world better for those people. We have people here who work with the Aboriginal Legal Services, a lot of people who are attracted to come here in particular because of the fantastic work the CIJ does. I know that's just, I put you into like 4 buckets or something there. What else is there? Is there anyone who doesn't
actually identify with any of those categories?
Is there anybody not identify with any of those or have an extra reason why you wanted to be a lawyer?
I suppose the family lawyers, but they're probably not at home because families of law.
Oh, yeah. They're people who just continuing on. They never imagine doing anything different. They often do LLBs.
They're not here. They're in Melbourne.
Possibly.
Well, they're not doing an LLB at Melbourne.
Yeah, they're not doing it. But no matter what kind of law you do, what you do with your law degree, there is an element of needing to do it within some kind of business context. Whether that's doing it as a partner of a law firm, which is kind of the traditional model that a lot of the cases will assume as you're in this subject, or whether that's running a community legal service, working at a community legal service, working in the kind of organisations that Adam was just talking about, working in government. We have a lot of government lawyers. And thinking, I think it's a really interesting opportunity right at the end of your degree, and most of you I assume are quite close to the end of your degrees, to think about, once I get this qualification that I've worked so hard to get, what am I actually going to do with it? What is the practice of law going to look like for me? And I know the elephant in the room for all law students at the moment is, am I even going to get a job? What is the future of law going to look like? So that's what we want to talk about today. And we want to talk about it in the context of what the business might look like, but also in the context of emerging and nascent technologies. I will put my other hat on the table. I realise, of course, you are too late for this, but my favourite subject to teach is actually tech and the law, which used to be called internet law, which runs over summer. We spend a lot more time on this kind of stuff there. So partly I'm just like trying to recruit smart, interesting people. So if it turns out that you're boring, I'll tell you that the subject sucks. So that's what we want to do today. Okay, so our plan is to start with a little exercise thinking about the business. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what disruption is. and then Adam's going to take you through some of the stuff that's happening in emerging technologies. I'll try and keep my mouth shut, but probably won't be successful. We'll have a conversation about this as we go. We're going to start with an exercise at the beginning that I'd like you to work on groups in, but I'd like you to keep thinking back to the exercise as we keep going, and why I say that will make sense as we go. Because the exercise we're going to start with is you preparing your first ever business plan. So we are going to do everything that they learn in an MBA in the first 5 minutes of this course. Now that might be a little bit hard to see on the screen, so in something that you all know that I had nothing to do with because I never print anything ever, grab some of those and send them back. There are some printed versions of this. Oh, sorry, I'm not doing a very good job of dividing them in reasonable numbers. Just grab some of those, and that's what it looks like. And I'm going to take you through this. So this is basically a one-page business plan. So I'm going to walk you through the different steps of what a business plan might look like. But then what we're going to do is we've got some much, much bigger versions of this and some post-it notes. And I want you guys to get into some groups, and you're going to have a think about what you imagine the business of law to be like. And we're going to put our post-it notes into the right area. So what do I mean by this? So this is a tool that's become really popular over probably the last 5 to 8 years. It comes out of a book by a guy called Eric Riles, I think, called The Lean Startup. So those of you who have a business background might have heard of that. And was taken into this one-page document by another guy called Alex Osterweiler. And the idea is that if you have a startup business idea or any business idea, you should be able to explain it coherently on one piece of paper. And so basically what this asks you to do is identify for your business, so we're thinking about a law practice now. When you gather up, we'll split you up into different groups to look at different things, but any kind of law practice. So just think about this as we go about. It's like, what is the value of the law? What's the value proposition for a law practice? So in other words, what kind of customer problems does this business solve? What kind of needs do the customers have? And what are the key features of the product or the service that solve those problems for those customers? Now, this is generic for any business, but I want you to think about that for legal practice. And already I suspect that as your minds turn, you think, well, answer that's going to be different if I'm talking about one of those marble-lined Collins Street international mega firms from the community legal service that's around the corner from there, or the guy from Crandon who's doing DUIs out of the back of his Commodore, or anything in between. I don't know why, it's always Crandon. He's always doing DUIs from out the back of his Commodore in my head. So think about who the customers are. Think about why they're customers. What kind of need are they being serviced? Because now, in the reading for this week and in the presentation that goes forward, you'll hear a lot from my own personal academic crush, a guy called Richard Susskind. And Richard Susskind has been writing for a long time about the future of law. He actually had his PhD in artificial intelligence, which he got in the 80s from memory. And he's also a lawyer. And he was a partner at a firm called Pinsent Masons, which is now in Australia as well. And they've been sort of at the leading edge of innovation in law firms for a very long time. But he's basically been an academic since the 90s, maybe even earlier. When his first book came out, The Future of Law, The End of Lawyers, with a question mark. Question mark is very important. The End of Lawyers. The Law Society in UK said to the BBC, it is dangerous to have this man interview this man. He should not be interviewed on television. He gives lawyers a bad name, because he was effectively saying there are bits of lawyers' jobs that will be replaced by machines. So think about that. Where did I go? I'm going on a little loop of my own. I'm not used to having a grown-up academic in the room. What do I do? Anyway, I'll get back on track in a second. So once we think about what the value proposition is, the next thing that we always think about is how do we get and grow customers? Because once we know what kind of customers we've got or we need, we've got to think about where they're going to come from. We also think about, in that context, our customer segments. So who the important customers are, who we care about, what jobs they're trying to get done, and how our products and services help and add value. And then lastly, in this group of category, we think about how our customers want to be reached. Got any accountants in the room? Really? Nobody? Just wondering if anybody's getting any hints from the use of the green on this particular side of the business plan. Let me finish off that the last thing we think about here is revenue streams. So all of these questions that we're asking here really go to how we get money in. Now, not every legal practice is going to be a for-profit practice. In fact, many of you will be looking to work in what is, I think, inappropriately called the not-for-profit sector. Again, as a corporate lawyer, I think everything should be for profit. But that doesn't mean that all profits should be then returned to the shareholders. I think it should be called not for dividend. Again, I'm a big fan of social enterprise, but social enterprise need to ultimately have more money coming in. Maybe not all from revenue, maybe some of it comes from its capital base, but it needs to have more money coming in than going out, because otherwise it's not sustainable. Okay? Companies weren't put on this earth. Just remember why I started talking about Suskin. The companies weren't put on this earth with a right to survive. I think it was Lord Denning, that I might be misquoting, said that the company was formed so gentlemen could take risk with other gentlemen's money. The whole idea of the and they were gentlemen, let's face it, the idea of the corporate entity is to limit the liability of its members to the amount of capital that they've paid up. So if you don't have as much capital as you have expenses, and your revenue isn't matching that, hi, sorry, do say hello, no. FaceTime, moving around. No, I'm being mean. Then we don't have a sustainable business. And the reason I started to talk about Susskind before is because one of the lines, again, I'm not going to quote him directly because my mind is not good at remembering things. This is why I did law, open book exams, yay. But he said that the law is no more there to make lawyers rich than ill health is there to make doctors rich. Think about what our customers need. And think about what it is that you're going to do. So this is the stuff that's on the revenue side. So if we've got a revenue side, we've also got an expenses side, right? So this is the next set of things that we think about. Our law practice, what does it do? What are the actual things that the lawyers do? Not just the lawyers, but inside that organisation. What does this business that we're going to write a business plan for need to do? What are its key activities? And what are the key resources that it needs to do those activities? Now this, I think, is one of the things that's really interesting at the moment. That the resources that you used to need to do law have changed dramatically. Just even think about it from the point of view of a student. I'm old, so in the 80s, when I was at law school, or even at high school, I got really good marks. I didn't have to work nearly as hard as you did. All I had to do was go to the library. But let's face it, 80% of my colleagues didn't. So I was I was okay. I went to the library, I read the stuff, I highlighted the bits that seemed to matter, and I regurgitated them in exams, and I did pretty well. Not brilliantly, but I did pretty well. The barrier to entry was access to the information. These days, you don't even have to go to the library. I don't know, do you know I've only been into the RMIT library once, and that was to get my library card? It has been under, renovation since then, but I can't be trusted with a book. What is the chances of me remembering to pick it up off the train, not spilling wine on it, anything like that? Everything has to be digital with me. I can't control F a book. When I control F a book, it's really, there's no control and there's a lot of F. The resources are quite different. And there isn't that same barrier to entry. So when I first started practicing law, I went in to a law firm, many rooms of which look like the Tim Smith Library upstairs. I love that room, don't you? It's beautiful and it makes me feel special and it makes me feel like I'm part of this elite and amazing club. But I don't need those books anymore. Each of those volumes cost hundreds of dollars. The barrier to entry to my client, even knowing whether there was a law, was getting hold of those books. That is no longer the case. So the job that you have to do and that lawyers have to do now is already exponentially harder than it was when I started. Because I had clients walk into the room not even knowing if there was a law that was relevant. Nowadays, Professor Google has told them everything that they need to know, probably about another jurisdiction, and created all of these biases in their heads about where, what their rights are and what their next steps are. It's quite different. The resources are really different. Next step here in thinking about resources and key activities and what you can tell red, money going out, our expenses are, is thinking about who the partners are, what the chain is, thinking about who our suppliers are, thinking about what our suppliers get from us and what we get from them. And key partners too, in the sense of even our clients can be partners to a certain extent. Publishers, providers of information, those who are litigators, just dealing with the courts and the infrastructure, dealing with mediators, dealing with barristers. It won't take you a lot to start thinking about the different kinds of partners that you have. And ultimately, those inputs go into what the cost structures are. Okay, so that's everything you need to know about business planning. With the big caveat, I need a big bubble over it, but I want you to be able to see this while you're doing exercise, so I haven't done it, that says you want the total of things that come out green to be greater than the total of the things that come out red, at least for the foreseeable future, and we have business plan.